Hi, I'm Claire, and you're listening to the Talk Carby to Me podcast.
So I was reading a passage the other day and I found it particularly moving. And I'm going to read it now. She wears short skirts. I wear t-shirts. She's cheer captain and I'm on the bleachers. Dreaming about the day when you wake up and find that what you're looking for has been here the whole time. And that hit something deep in me. It was right in front of me and I didn't see it.
Tell me more.
There's a lot more to the passage. I think we're going to leave the passage there because I don't want to break into song.
I mean, I almost did. So.
If you would have just started doing the percussion right on the desk there,
Yeah.
we could have made it happen. So, how are you after your girl wins her first Super Bowl?
In her rookie year in the NFL. I thanks for asking, first of all. I am elated. This is far and away the best content I have seen on the internet, maybe ever. It is a joy to open my social media apps, and I am just thrilled. I feel like I too have won the Super Bowl in this moment.
The impact that she's had on the sport has been very interesting to see.
Yes.
Obviously, you have the financial impact where she's generated something like a third of a billion for the league. Chiefs merchandise was through the roof. You have even more Chiefs merchandise because Taylor's boyfriend is now a thing, which is great. My personal favorite thing after the Super Bowl was all the people wearing shirts where it was like Taylor's boyfriend is performing at the Usher concert.
Yes, that was one of the best memes for sure coming up
Yeah,
on the internet.
yeah, that was a great thing.
That's good. Yeah.
And of course, in typical American society fashion, she's received so much hate for it. Some people calling the game rigged. There was no way the NFL would let Taylor lose. No way that they would.
Government conspiracies.
The
I
government
mean,
conspiracies.
it's pretty incredible stuff.
It is wild to see. I'm not sure if we call it backlash, but definitely see the reaction and where people go with it.
And how far they're willing to take it.
Yeah. Here's the funny thing with me. I watch the NBA. I don't watch it nightly, but I've watched it for almost the entirety of my life, just like I have the entirety, I've watched football. Baseball is another story. However, I'm a Los Angeles Lakers fan.
Tell me what you see when you watch a Los Angeles Lakers game, Anthony.
Every single Los Angeles Lakers game, with the exception of the COVID year and the year after,
Hmm.
Jack Nicholson has been
Yep.
sitting courtside for the game, and the game pans to the Laker game, and they're like, "Hey, everyone, welcome to Los Angeles at the Staples Center." And you see the players go up, shake Jack Nicholson's hand. He's a season ticket holder. He's been there forever, to the point where recently, when we were making our playoff run last year, he finally came back. He was feeling a little better. And they actually have stats for their record in the playoffs when he's in attendance at home, and it's drastically different.
Mm.
If you watch a Miami Heat basketball game, who do you see sitting courtside because he also is a season ticket holder? DJ Khaled. If you watch a Toronto Raptor broadcast when they're at home, who's in attendance? Drake. So much so that sometimes the commentators allow Drake into their little booth and he's commentating on a live NBA game while it's happening. So for me, seeing in the NFL, you have Taylor Swift in attendance. Granted, just by the structure of the sport, the crowd is less intimate because they're not right there on the field, so they're farther away. It's really not that weird. It's just that NFL players don't always have high profile wives or girlfriends or anything like that. I mean, you had Tony Romo back in the day, had Jessica Simpson. So she was shown on TV a lot back when she was relatively popular. But aside from Russell Wilson has Sierra, but there's not a ton of them. And they showed at the Super Bowl, obviously you see Taylor and it's funny that people actually counted 54 total seconds. But you also saw LeBron James there. The Kardashians were there. Beyonce was
Beavers.
there, the Bieber was there, like everyone was fucking there. And it's like, oh my god,
Yeah.
this looks like a Los Angeles Lakers game at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just wild to see that they're like, oh my god, like why are you keep showing her? It's like, what else are they going to show? Like, you just want to see a random drunk guy like all the time? Like, yeah, that's cool, but or like the fan holding the sign, like, okay, great, she's there. And furthermore, like, oh, like she looks so excited, like, and like people like freaking out about it. And it's like, have you ever seen like a Dallas Cowboys fan? Like how they get into the game? Like, have you ever seen someone who makes like a bet on a parlay? Like y'all look the same. Like, like let the girl go and enjoy a sport.
She's
And they're
just
like, oh,
being a human. Like
yeah,
yeah,
right.
sure.
And it brings more eyes to the sport. The NFL obviously has um, plans to expand. They're having they're trying to get into youth programs in Ghana. They're having a game in Germany that they've had for a couple of years now. Games in London. They got a game in Mexico. They're doing one in Brazil. Like having global popularity on that scale is a good thing. The reason why something like that is good because Taylor Swift is an icon globally. To compare it to a different sport, look at FIFA and soccer. Cristiano Ronaldo is probably 3 times as famous as Taylor Swift is globally, right? So having someone with global reach just beyond the United States, you see how well her tours have done in other countries. Like it's a good thing. It's an important thing. It's good for the sport, which everyone kind of wants. Um, and then you have the political angle.
Oh,
I don't really want to go down the political rabbit hole.
I figured you didn't.
I just think it's funny. The only thing that I will say is the irony is not lost on a woman who's made a career with albums about her horrible choices and boyfriends coming out and endorsing a male. And I'll just leave that there. But I think it's funny. But that conspiracy that the election this year will be rigged due to
Mhm.
her specifically is like, what? It's like, do you not remember a couple years ago she endorsed one of her hometown senators and that person lost and she was still popular then? And it's
Yeah.
largely not representative of how people vote at the polls. And it's a very wild and deep rabbit hole. And it's like not the important thing.
Yeah, it's truly incredible stuff. Like, it is as though she is the first celebrity to, like, inform people she's democratic in nature. Like, it's actually pretty common. But I will say the memes comparing, her and Travis's kiss to the moon landing and how in both cases, 50% of America assume it's a government conspiracy. That was also some of my favorite content on the internet.
Yeah, that one's pretty funny. I'm not. There's no way that moon landing footage, or not the footage, the viewership. There's no way that's real.
I think they were adjusting it for, like, population and, like, percentage like, I think it was all, like, adjusted percentages, if I understand correctly, but a hilarious meme nevertheless.
Yeah, I'm gonna throw on my cape for soccer. The World Cup final was watched by 4 billion people, so that was the viewership for that event. So I don't want to hear anything about that NFL. Um, and I don't believe like I don't have an opinion on the moon landing. I largely don't care. Seems legit, I guess. I don't have the time or the patience to like dive into it. Someone's gonna have to come up with a way better, way more enticing story for me. Like I love a good conspiracy theory, especially when they come true. But that one doesn't have me at all. Like I like the 13 conspiracies with all the data and like her 13-hour flight from
Yeah,
Tokyo.
it's
What
fantastic.
was the other Superbowl 58? 5 + 8 is 13. Like all this.
There were so many, so, like, it's all just fun and games, but it did happen a lot. It was her 13th appearance at an NFL game.
Yeah. 87 plus 13 is 100. Who knows what the hundred's for, but that fits too. Like, fuck it. So yeah, it's been funny. It'd be interesting to see if they make it to next season. Because if not, he's going to have a diss track come out about him from Taylor, which I'll appreciate. Also, for anyone complaining that Taylor Swift isn't that good of an artist, to look at the other artists she's compared to, and then just ask yourself why she keeps winning Grammys. Like it's just that simple. Her catalog, yeah, her catalog. I'm really caping for Taylor right now.
You are. I'm just enjoying it.
If you put her catalog against another current artist, there's only like one or two that can compete with the longevity at which she's put out hits. Everyone knows every single hit on every single one of Taylor Swift's albums. Same thing with Drake, who would be another one. Who would be Beyonce might be the other.
Beyonce, I would well, yeah, I would argue Beyonce and Rihanna if she hadn't taken such a long hiatus.
Yeah, I said this during last year's Super Bowl, during her halftime show. All of Rihanna's best songs have another major artist on them, which is the
Oh, I
issue.
remember you saying that, yeah. But here's the thing, Anthony, like, in the court of public opinion, like, you may not speak ill about Rihanna. Like, whereas people can speak ill about Taylor Swift, like, all over the internet, like, Rihanna is untouchable for, and there's a I won't we don't need to get into all the reasons for that, but that does seem to be the case. And whether that's fair or not, it's not for me to say. But
So I'm glad to have you back.
I'm so happy to be back.
Claire's coming back to join us today. We're going to talk about the effects of alcohol on nutrition and fitness. And in honor of our episode, I've poured myself a glass of wine, if you haven't been able to tell by the last 10 minutes of commentary.
I too have done the same. So I'm kind of showing my cards to everybody early on. So cheers to you, Anthony.
Cheers. Your glass is so legit.
It's iridescent.
I'm usually like a red solo cup kind of guy, but I found this hanging out in my cabinet. I was like, yeah, I'll rock with this.
What are you drinking?
I have no idea. It's something red. I got it. I got it. I got it as a gift because my clients love me. So get your trainer's wine if they're out there. It's a red blend from Napa Valley, 2017. What a good year.
You have no idea.
No clue. I don't even remember. I think I was unemployed in 2017, so I don't
Well, there you go. Probably weren't drinking red blends from Napa then.
know. No, we were a whiskey guy back then.
Okay. Very good.
So, what got you looking into alcohol in terms of duck nutrition?
Well, two things. One, most of my clients drink alcohol. Most of the world drinks alcohol. And two, I drink alcohol. So, as somebody who works in the fitness and nutrition industry, I thought it was important that I understand what the effects of alcohol were on our metabolism, our nutrition, our fitness, and whether it's actually worth the cost of drinking alcohol to continue to consume it. And is there any benefit in consuming it?
There's definitely a benefit in consuming it. You forget about all the bad days and the dreariness that is human existence.
we're we're gonna stick to metabolic reasons today,
Oh,
but sure,
metabolism.
I am happy to come back for that existential conversation as well.
Yeah, I need to trauma dump on everyone that listens to my podcast. If you guys have a minute.
Listen, happy to be here for it.
No, we're not trauma dumping. Don't worry. No, we're going to talk about its effects that it has on your workout routine, your daily life, your diet. Claire's going to go through some details for us that'll help us keep drinking and making gains.
Right? Yeah.
And it's just in time for Valentine's Day. So this episode, what's today? Friday. Valentine's Day was a couple days ago. So shout out to everyone who fell in love on Wednesday. Shout out to everyone who got cheated on. Shout out to everyone who found out they were the side chick. Thinking of all of you guys. But let's not forget the joy we have being so after Valentine's Day clearance candy.
Yes.
It's a big win.
Well,
Big win for everyone in the community.
I also saw clearance flowers at Target today. So if you want some flowers that still look and smell really good, they're 50% off at Target right now.
Clearance flowers.
Yeah.
Talk about a depreciating asset.
But I mean, if you want to get them for like a very reasonable price, since they are so depreciating, now's the time.
Did you get flowers?
I did.
Oh.
There's some behind me too.
How long will you keep them alive?
Well, these I've had since Monday. And so that they're on day 4. They'll probably make it through the weekend. So they'll make it through my dinner party tonight. That's all I care about.
That's all that matters.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. So give me your top 5 drinks, alcohol based. It doesn't necessarily have to be wine. Uh, top 5 drinks.
And this is just like for my personal, like my personal choice.
Your personal choice.
Okay. Well, I could just give you 5 red wines and that would be enough, but I'll say red wine, number 1, just in general. Um, an aviation, which is a very old gin-based cocktail that not many people know about that I love very dearly. A good margarita,
Mm.
a well-balanced gin and tonic, and an old fashioned.
Ooh, I'm glad you put that in there.
My
Old
husband's a
fashions.
whiskey guy, so
Oh, I'm aware.
yeah.
He has still to this day, he has the most sophisticated palate of any man I've ever met, of any human I've ever met.
Yeah, he's really fun to cook dinner for.
It's like, damn it, Claire, you put too much paprika in this.
It's a real joy around our dinner table sometimes, I have to say.
So he's obviously got the coffee thing going. He's got the whiskey thing going. Does that translate to food too?
It does, yeah. It just makes him a picky eater, and then also like even if a meal is excellent, he can pick out what is off balanced about it, like whether it's too acidic or if it has an ingredient in it that he doesn't like, even if it's just a tablespoon of it, he can usually peg that. Or if the water got too hot during cooking, like he can call those things out. So,
That's impressive. Meanwhile, I'm over here eating Uncrustables, like complaining that they're getting stale.
well, it's interesting because he either wants like perfectly a perfectly done meal that's like really exquisite in every way, or he wants like kid food. Like those are the two extremes, and he can't really tolerate anything in between.
Yeah, toddler food is where it's at.
There's a lot of that in my house.
It takes yeah, it takes the thought out of it.
Yeah, it's just like the pure deliciousness of like salt and fat or
Yeah,
sugar. So,
yeah. You have to think
but if
about
you
it
try
like
to like, make anything more complicated, that's when he'll start critiquing and he can call stuff out.
so yeah, being a trainer in alcohol and looking at that category, I think it's a very funny thing. It's a very misunderstood category. Um I am of the belief that I think people look at it as like this low hanging fruit in their diet. When while certainly it plays a role in everything, it's usually not the thing that's preventing you from doing what you need to do, getting where you need to go. With the exception of a certain category of people who drink for pain. Um, aside from it being to the point where it's a problem, there is room for enjoyment in it, and it's a nuanced category. And if you're taking advice from fitness professionals or anything like that, and anything is like 100%, this is bad for you automatically. I mean, this isn't anything in life. If it's 100% like one side or the other, like they're probably wrong.
Mhm.
There's nuance in
Yeah,
everything, right? So,
sure.
should you drink every single day starting at 2 p.m. to 10 p.m.? Probably not. You're probably going to run into some things, but a glass of wine here or there, a drink, whatever your choice may be, definitely has some room for it. So we're going to dive into that. So how do you feel about how it fits into someone's nutrition rhythm or routine?
Yeah, okay. So I think it vastly depends on what your goal is in considering alcohol in your nutrition. So like if you are an athlete who is training for like very high performance, I would have a different recommendation than if you are one of my clients in a female in their 40s to 50s just trying to be healthier, live longer, and maybe like lose 5 to 10 pounds. Like those are two really different categories, and I would have different recommendations on alcohol for each. But I do think, to your point, alcohol in general, as it relates to nutrition, is vastly misunderstood, especially in terms of how it's metabolized and how it contributes to our fat stores or it doesn't. And so that's what I love to talk to people about is here's the truth behind how alcohol is metabolized and whether or not it's actually the problem here.
So it's viewed as like the fourth macronutrient.
Yes, so that's like I mean, it is a fallacy, right? Because it alcohol is not an essential nutrient, so it can't be a macronutrient. but it's called that because it's very calorically dense, or it's rich in energy. So whereas carbohydrates and protein have 4 grams, I'm sorry, 4 calories per gram, and fat has 9 calories per gram. Alcohol doesn't have 4 or 9; it has 7 calories per gram of alcohol. And so that's why it's called sometimes the fourth macronutrient, just because it doesn't fit neatly into one of those 3 categories, and it's not metabolized like the other 3 categories.
So you're saying I can get energy from alcohol?
You can, however, um, is this the part where I get to dive into alcohol metabolism?
You could dive in at any point that you'd like.
I would love to. So you can get some energy from alcohol. However, 90% of the alcohol you consume is immediately or as quickly as possible metabolized by the liver, because your body views alcohol primarily as a toxin and wants to metabolize it very quickly. So only about 10% of alcohol enters your bloodstream unaltered, which is what changes our blood alcohol levels, which we're tested for to find out if we're tipsy or drunk, right? So, alcohol at 7 calories per gram, metabolized in the liver. The liver prefers it as a fuel source so like prolifically that it will delay the metabolism of other nutrients like fat, carbohydrates, in order to metabolize the alcohol quickly. So that's where you run into trouble. It isn't with the alcohol calories you're consuming, because those are getting metabolized very, very quickly. It's with what you're eating and drinking alongside of it. So, for example, if I have a very sugary cocktail that has some alcohol, like a little bit of tequila in it and a lot of different fruit juices and syrups and stuff like that, or if I'm having a very fatty meal with a lot of alcohol, my liver is going to metabolize the alcohol first, because that is always going to be its priority. And it's going to delay the metabolism of carbohydrates and fat, which could contribute to the storage of more of those nutrients as fat cells.
So it's one of those things where, let's say I'm eating in a 200 calorie deficit
Mhm.
and I'm through my day of eating, I'm having dinner and I have a drink with my dinner. The you run the risk of having where the alcohol will close your deficit and then the rest of it is just now you're in a surplus.
Kind of, yeah, like in a simplification of things. So, like normally for weight loss clients, we tell them that although alcohol calories are not the calories that are probably contributing to weight gain, they, because they are metabolized first, should be considered in your energy deficit. So, for example, if you're functioning in a 200 calorie deficit, you probably shouldn't consume more than 200 calories of alcohol multiple days per week, or you will not stay in that deficit and you will gain weight, kind of thing. I would treat it just like I treat fat or carbohydrates if you're trying to function in a deficit.
Yeah, I've always when I have someone who tends to drink occasionally as a client, I you will usually on a night of drinking, I'll say, hey, maybe lunch or somewhere in your day, like lower your carb and just assume that that's going to fill that void, which goes contrary to, oh, I just lost my camera here, which goes contrary to the typical thing. It's like, oh, you should eat bread so that way you have stuff to soak up the alcohol that's in your system. It's like,
Right.
oh, is that how that works? Like I put a sponge in me and then like that's where all the tequila goes.
Right. Exactly. Uh, are you familiar with Physiconomics, Adam from Physiconomics?
I am not. Do tell.
It's a long running fitness blog. He's been on the internet probably since before like Instagram and social media, as a British physique competitor. Um, and his articles are like really satirical and really funny, but also really informative. Uh, and he uses like cuss words like profusely throughout them. So he's got to the point where he had to like he would do his like fat loss article, and then he would do his like kid friendly fat loss article because they were like so strewn with cuss words. But he is really informative, and he speaks in nutrition and like athletic performance in a way that like normal people can understand. And so I went back to an article from years ago that I remember reading from him about, I think the title of it was How to Get Turned Up Without Affecting Your Progress. And so
Mm.
he was trying to teach people, like, if you want to go have a night, if you are pursuing a fitness goal, but you want to go have a night out and like get really drunk. Like, here's how you do that without screwing up all of your progress. And he has a lot of really interesting things to say. One of which that I think the biggest takeaway for most people is that if you are considering alcohol within the scope of like trying to stay in a caloric deficit, you have to either contribute those 7 calories per gram to fat or to carbohydrates if you're functioning like on macros, like if you're trying to like hit certain macros. And that it's easiest to do it with fat because it's actually closer to your fat calories per gram than it is to carb calories per gram. But that's a really helpful way to look at it, I think, for those people who are tracking macros and caloric deficit.
I look at like the nutrition space and like the fitness space, and um, I think I talk about this a lot in the podcast. I think there's too much fucking information out there. Everything is way too complicated. I think my advice for people with alcohol, typically that's not the thing that I go for. Um, we'll obviously go into more explanation about what it does, what happens, and why you should or shouldn't. But most people, they just don't eat enough food. They don't have enough whole foods in their diets. They don't have enough protein in their diets. If you come to me as a client and you give me your nutrition, you got a couple glasses of wine here and there, and then I'm like, oh my God, alcohol, that there it is. That's the thing. And that's where it all changed for me. I got rid of alcohol. Oh my God. It's like, okay, so here's, you're going to hire me to fix your diet and nutrition. I'm going to make you the most miserable person of all time. And now you can't go to book club. Now you can't host dinners. Now you can't like go out with your friends. And maybe that's the only last remaining link to your social life. Like, um, I think people need to be very honest and look themselves in the mirror when they approach the topic of their nutrition, their health, anything in general. Be like, what are the things that I'm not willing to give up?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, like for me,
Yep.
like I'm gonna eat an Uncrustable. Like
Yeah.
you bet your ass I'm gonna eat a chocolate chip cookie if one is presented to me. You know what I
Sure.
mean? A
Yeah.
Reese's peanut butter cup. Like I'm aware of these things, so I don't beat myself up for it. It's the same thing. Like I don't drink a lot now, but I'm from the Northeast. We get after it. So when I go home, like we eat much better pizza than is available in the South, and we drink a lot. And that's always like since like 15, 16 years old, like that's been our bonding ritual. Like,
Mm.
we get together, we have a couple of drinks, we tell stories, we update people on our lives. And so like it'll never be a thing where like I'm doing dry January. It's like January is
Yeah.
already like 84 days. It's miserable, it's cold most places. Like you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like
Sure.
be
Yeah.
very yeah, be very honest with yourself. Now, like this doesn't like if you're like obliterated blackout drunk every day, then that conversation becomes entirely different.
Right. Sure.
So I think before we progress here too, like my advice is just like be very honest with yourself if it's something that you're either looking to completely eliminate because maybe you think it's a problem, or you're not sure how much is a problem. But like if that's the thing you're not willing to give up, just understand that there's a way to do it where you might have to give something else up that maybe you would be willing to let go. But be very honest with yourself about that when you look at your nutrition, and are looking into changes that you want to make.
I think that's an excellent point. And I would probably perhaps at the end like to circle back just to like what the difference is between this is part of your daily life and like so in society versus like you are a heavy drinker and you depend on alcohol and like what to look for in those things. Like obviously that's not what this podcast is for, but I do think it's a really healthy distinction to make for anybody that might be wondering, like, well, do I not want to cut this out because it's part of my social life and I love it very dearly and it's important to me, or is there something darker happening here? So, but we can circle back to that at the end, perhaps.
You don't want to just dive into the darkness now.
Well, you know I love the darkness, but I but I think maybe we'll stay on metabolism for a little bit because there
Yes.
is more to say there for sure.
So I have a question as we continue through here. Like, what are the effects that might have on your metabolism if you're someone who's just like a Gen Pop person, or someone who's like trains like an athlete, is high intensity stuff every single day? Like, where does that? How does that play into? How does alcohol play into those like routines or those lives?
So as previously mentioned, alcohol does affect fat metabolism, not just while you're eating and drinking, but in the short term for like up to 24 hours. So I think that's a pretty long estimate based on some studies, and the evidence is really inconclusive there. But it is important to note that after consuming alcohol, your fat metabolism drastically declines. So you're not necessarily just metabolizing alcohol anymore, but even after that. So say you go out for the night, you drink a good bit, the next morning you get up and you go work out just as you normally would. If you were to, hook yourself up to like a VO2 machine and figure out what percentage of fat versus carbohydrates you're burning, compared to normal, your carb burn is going to be a lot higher than your fat burn, at least in the short term. So that's the first physiological effect that I think is applicable to most people working out that they should be aware of. And so there's two ways to look at healthy consumption of alcohol, and they're kind of at odds with each other in a way. But the first way is to say 80% of the time, don't drink alcohol because it affects your fat metabolism. So maybe keep your alcohol consumption to 2 nights or less per week. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is more of the blue zones way, which we can get to in a little bit because I think it's a really helpful perspective as well. But it's sort of the opposite of that approach. I think they're both healthy, they're just different. So that's my fat metabolism spill. And then I can go on from there.
Yeah, go for it.
Um, so body composition, the results are extremely inconclusive and mixed, and there needs to be tons more research. But I think the general rule of thumb is alcohol itself is not the reason you have a body composition problem. It is the amount, perhaps the amount you're drinking and the amount you're eating along with it that could cause the problem. Now, again, this is all for like light to moderate drinking. If you're a heavy drinker or an alcohol abuser, that can affect like the way in which you store fat and the amount of fat you store, particularly around your midsection, and it can affect a lot of things in much more negative ways. So, but for a light to moderate drinker, there's no reason to believe that alcohol itself is the reason for any body composition issues or change.
Does it play? Can it play a role in like your microbiome and how you digest food? Like if let's say you have like years of you're not a heavy drinker, but a glass of wine every night at dinner for years and years. Does that play a role into how you digest and absorb nutrients?
So, as far as the like very limited evidence shows us, alcohol does impact digestion, but only in terms of what they call chronic alcohol ingestion. So, I would consider that more than light to moderate drinking. So, if your ingestion of alcohol is chronic, and moderately heavy or heavy, then it is going to affect your microbiome. It's also going to affect your pancreatic enzyme production. And so that's going to decrease your nutrient absorption. So alcohol really works pretty effectively against the absorption of most B vitamins, vitamin K and vitamin A and folate.
Okay.
So, like, if you look at the blood alcohol, or I'm sorry, not the blood alcohol, but the blood chemistry of alcoholics, a lot of studies have been done, and folic acid is the number one deficiency in alcoholics, B vitamins and vitamin K being 2 and 3.
Interesting. Do you think with it being B vitamins, do you think if you got a drunk vegan or like an alcoholic vegan and an alcoholic person on a carnivore diet, like they would it be much more drastic?
That's a good question that I haven't considered.
Like, is this data we can find?
There probably isn't enough of it out there. I would love to see it. And what I don't know too is, how well does like if you're an avid supplement taker of like really good quality supplements, how much so does it affect like your intake of those vitamins in supplement form? Like, I don't know the answer to that. Most of the research done on how it affects nutrient absorption is on problem drinkers or alcoholics. So there's very little done or very inconclusive evidence on light to moderate drinkers. Okay, so again, I would say, insofar as we understand the science now, I would not worry about it in terms of your nutrient absorption unless your alcohol usage is chronic, heavy, problematic, etc.
Very true. I think it's also I think it's also important to understand like if you're going out drinking, like the day that you're having it needs to be important, right? So, or it needs to be
Mhm.
like well managed, I should say.
Yeah,
So like people always ask me, especially like new clients, like, what do I do for healthy snacks? And the answer to that question is simple. You don't. Like you just don't. You just eat more and you figure
yeah.
out a way to do it. There are some exceptions to that, of course, in which case, a protein shake, a yogurt, maybe a little parfait, something like that, whatever you got near you, some fruit. But remember, when you go out to a bar uh, or you go to a restaurant, right, you get like, here's free chips and salsa, here's free peanuts, anything that they put out there, like all the salty food is going to make you thirstier. So you keep buying drinks.
Mhm.
Um, So if you're already full and you don't really feel like eating, you don't have much of an appetite, you won't really fall prey to the marketing tactic there that most establishments will use, giving you salty foods, and obviously that can snowball where you end up drinking way more than you thought that you should have, or you get so drunk and then suddenly Taco Bell at 2 a.m. seems like a great idea.
Seems like a great idea. Yeah, for
A,
sure.
a, a
Mhm.
great time to point out here. There's tons of scientific research that says Taco Bell tastes better after 2 a.m. Just a fact. Just a fact.
Ample scientific research, yeah.
Yeah. I just looked it up. I typed in the question I just asked you, right? So it'd be interesting to see the blood chemistry between an omnivore and a vegan. And there's not really any data. No one's decided to test it. So we might pioneer this actually.
Great, can't we can talk about it off pod. I can't wait to plan this with you. I will say the one part of digestion that alcohol does affect, and it's very well studied, is its effect on protein synthesis. So, if you are not just trying to lose weight, if you are actively trying to build muscle, just know that alcohol consumption is definitely going to affect the rate and ability with which your liver has to synthesize amino acids and protein. So, it is going to affect your ability to build muscle.
Very interesting point that you just made here, which kind of linked into unknowing to you what I just said. Is there like a number that they associated with how much protein synthesis drops uh, with alcohol consumption?
Not that I don't know that off the top of my head, did not come across it, like, as I was making notes for this, but I'm sure that number does exist.
Okay. Yeah. Last episode, I touched on a study that showed a vegan diet versus omnivore diet. Macro for macro, almost similar as far close as they can get them, and it showed a difference in uh, 47% protein synthesis, or 47% less. So I think it'd be interesting too. So maybe if they do that test under the influence of alcohol, how much that might change. These are the
That
questions
would
people need.
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's the study that I would like to conduct, is to see, and they are out there. I just don't know those numbers, and I'm not going to, like, fake any numbers on your podcast today, but it is well documented that it negatively affects protein synthesis, so that's definitely something to consider, at least in terms of how often you're consuming alcohol. So again, another vote for the 80/20 rule, perhaps.
So are you saying back in the day, the Jersey Shore guys, they knew the secret because they were all jacked, with the exception of one of them, and they drank all the time,
I think that they knew a secret that maybe wasn't an entirely legal one.
which is my favorite topic.
Not the topic I came on this podcast to discuss. Another, I guess, kind of along those same veins. So if we get away from digestion and nutrients and we just jump down to hormones, but it still plays into, like, protein synthesis and muscle building. Prolonged alcohol consumption, again, chronic alcohol ingestion, does lead to typically lower rates in testosterone in both men and women, and can actually convert testosterone to estrogens.
Really?
hmm Again, this is in chronic and heavy, so I'm using those terms very very consciously.
Mm.
Um, in male alcoholics, you can see, like, a lot of endocrine disorders pop up. Like, all of them being, like, low testosterone related, like everything from, like, fertility to, et cetera, et cetera. But
You can say it.
it
You can say it because I'm about to.
I'll let you say it, please.
No, I mean, if you're a female listening to this podcast, if you're a male too, we've all been there on a night of drinking where maybe it's Valentine's Day, maybe it gets a little frisky, and he's like, "Hey, something's not working right."
Yeah. Yes.
there that's why it's important to, have some balance to you if you do have, a lot of drinking going on. Because obviously that's gonna affect your performance in the bed, which will then lead you to, potentially finding out you're the sad guy. So step
In
that
the
up.
bed, so it affects your performance in the bed and in the gym, again, for moderate like, more than moderate drinkers. I would just like to note that there's in the studies that have been conducted, no noticeable level of change in testosterone in light to moderate drinkers. So, don't freak
Uh,
out.
that's a relief. Whew. So we know as a society that we hate water, regardless of what Stanley is trying to do for the water consumption of America. We are all underwatered. It's almost difficult for some people to drink enough water in a day. We know alcohol, because it's a diuretic, dehydrates us. So if you're someone who's active, especially if you're an athlete, you have to take additional steps to make sure your hydration is up to snuff, because as soon as you start drinking, we've all been there. It's coming right out of you, whether you break the seal, whether you just have a small bladder, whatever you got going on, it's coming out of you a lot. So, right. So when you go wake up the next day to perform, right, whether you're going for a run, whether it's something high intensity, you're playing a sport or something like that, you want to make sure that like the night before, like what I've always done, I'll take I'm a big fan of Pedialyte, but some kind of electrolyte solution. I'll force water down because I already know that I'm probably already not at my water intake level where I'm supposed to be. And now I just made it worse because now I just lost all my water. That's why, excuse me, if you wake up, when you wake up in the morning and you're, maybe a little hungover, maybe you're a little boozy from the last night, and you look in the mirror, you're like, oh, wow, I look a little, look a little better. I look a little leaner. It's just because you're super dehydrated, right? So
Mhm. If you didn't go to Taco Bell at 2 AM. If you did that, then maybe you don't look leaner.
correct. No, nothing bloats you or hydrates you like a cheesy gordita crunch and a Baja Blast. I'm just saying. But you want to make sure that you have those things in place that can help you plan ahead, right? So as soon as you stop drinking, usually I'll make sure, if I'm going out, I'll make sure I have some Pedialyte around or some of the packets I can mix in water, just because I know that's going to be probably the thing that's going to hit me the most the next day.
Yeah, that's a great point. I have nothing to add. In like literally any electrolyte mix will be fine. Maybe one without sugar, preferably. Liquid IV is a great one. Pedialyte is also good.
If it's good enough for babies with diarrhea, it's good enough for me.
I mean, fair enough. If you can choke it down, please do it. And it's not just it is for the hangovers, but it is also it's for the electrolytes and also for the um the hydration, like replenishment. That's extremely important. So it's a good note to have.
Yeah, because even if you're listening to this and like you don't drink ever, you've probably been dehydrated and tried to work out, and that didn't go too well. Hydration plays a major role. So almost look at it as like if your life is at a one difficulty, and maybe that's just normal, like normal life, right? There's like it's now 1.5 when you have alcohol in the mix. So that's not to say that life is going to be harder because of it, but like you need to take additional steps to overcome the change in like your your personal metaverse of like what you do, what comes in, what comes out, stuff like that.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Thanks for adding it.
So you were saying heart disease. Do tell.
Can I talk about hearts now? I would love
Yes,
to.
we. This isn't going to go dual screen, so it's not going to matter if I put one up.
We can't. Can
Wait,
we?
I can't. No,
There's,
this is not going to work.
wait. Okay, okay, fine. Nope,
No, it's not.
the wrong way. Okay,
Yeah.
it's fine. Okay, so I think one of the most fascinating things about we've said a lot of negative effects about alcohol at this point, but I think it's really important to address the one area that like the blue zones address in their conversations about alcohol, which is how red wine specifically, but alcohol in general, can affect your heart health. Okay. So the blue zones, you have an entire podcast on it. I think most people listening to this podcast are probably familiar with it. But just as like a very quick, a bunch of researchers got together and they went out to identify the five like healthiest populations in the world, basically the populations with the highest number of centenarians or 100 plus year olds in the world. And then they sought to discern what sorts of things were they doing in their everyday life that led to their longevity and their vitality, right? And now it's become it's a whole brand. And so there's a cookbook and there's a documentary out there. There's a website. It's all very informative. Obviously, somebody's paying them to do their research and put out this content. So you should always look into what they're trying to accomplish in doing that. But I still think that their information is really valuable. So that's what I'll say about blue zones. Um, and one of the things that they did is they took these 5 original populations that they studied, and they picked out 9 different lifestyle factors that they believed were the keys to longevity and vitality. Of those 9, only 3 of them were actually related to nutrition. So there's like community based stuff and social based stuff, and like other things like that. But only 3 of the 9 had anything to do with what we're ingesting in our bodies. And one of those 3 was alcohol intake. And what they said was that you should have 1 to 2 glasses, or the equivalent of 1 to 2 standard drinks per day, every day. And that contributes to a long and vitalitous life. I might have just made that word up. You
I
can
like
fact
it.
check me later. Thank you.
It's my new favorite
Uh,
word.
Thank you. Of the 5 original populations that they studied, 4 of them, with the only exception being a population of Seventh-day Adventists in California, consumed 1 to 2 glasses, usually of red wine, but in the case of Japan, it was sake per day. And what they found was that led to it usually typically meant that they had a good social circle with whom they enjoyed these 1 to 2 glasses per day. And 2, it led to a pretty sharp decrease in their risk of coronary artery disease, heart attacks, CVD, anything related to heart disease. So I think that that's really fascinating. If you look at American and other studies of alcohol intake and heart disease, there's a U or a J shaped curve on the graph, meaning that people who don't drink at all the way to alcoholics is what you're looking at on that graph, right? And so the graph, if it goes like this, the highest percentage of mortality from cardiovascular disease is from alcoholics, but the second highest is from non-drinkers. And
Interesting.
everywhere in between is lower. And with the lowest point in that U or that J-shaped curve really is moderate drinkers, people who have 1 to 2 glasses almost daily.
Ah,
It's really fascinating.
yeah. The blue zones seem to have figured it out.
They figured something out for sure.
This studio right now is a fucking blue zone. Uh, Shout out to red wine. So we're never dying. So sorry for you pedestrians. But yeah, the blue zone stuff is so interesting because like you would like if I told you like, hey, this is my documentary, I'm going to take you to the land where like people live to 100, no problem. Like you wouldn't expect like most of the things that you would find.
Mm-hmm. That they're saying, yeah, sure.
Like they don't have really advanced medical systems. Like they're usually far removed, remote. Like they're eating off the land. My personal favorite one is like everyone has like a purpose in their
Yes,
community.
yeah, mm-hmm. That's
You
a
know what
big
I
part
mean?
of it.
Like if you got to build a house, you got a guy, and he's the only guy. And then like you got your dentist, who's the guy, and like the doctor, who's the guy, the farmer, who's the guy, and so on and so forth. And every single one of them, they love them some wine. They also hang out a lot.
They hang out a lot. Yeah, they're not living in isolation for sure.
Yeah, and they do not work out. Like they don't.
They have daily movement. Daily movement is they're walkers.
Yeah, they don't work out in the sense of like how Americans think of exercise, where it's like I'm doing
I'm
something
going
with
to
an
the gym.
implement in the gym, in a
Yeah.
studio, something like that.
None of the original 5 zones were in places that had like gyms in the way that we think of them. Like no Planet Fitness, no Lifetime Athletic, like none of it. No Golds. Yeah, it is really fascinating.
Yeah, it's incredible, and shout out to them for making it happen.
Yeah. Mhm.
What's I'm not sure if you mentioned it, so forgive me if I'm making you repeat yourself. What's the one that they tried to create in the United States? Like, isn't there one? I believe it's in California. Like they've tried to make it to see if they could reproduce the results. So it's kind of it's not so much
Oh,
like
yeah,
a
yeah, yeah.
It's
Mhm.
not so much like a gated community, but it's definitely like its own little entity somewhere, maybe like a subdivision or something.
Yes, I'm familiar with what you're talking about, I don't know the name of it, but one of the original Blue Zones was actually in Loma Linda, California, and it's a community of Seventh-day Adventists, so, like, that wasn't a generated community, that was a community that they studied and that already existed. But I yes, there is another community in California that was trying to implement these 9 things, and make it happen. I don't know if they were successful or if that's something they're still endeavoring to do.
Yeah, I haven't seen any change. Maybe that should be a deep dive for another episode, but it'd be interesting to see with them just trying to create something that's just not organically there. If that plays a role, like, oh, we need a fitness center, and like if the data has changed from what ends up happening there.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah.
I will say that I feel like probably people listening or that their next question might be, well, why? Why does drinking 1 to 2 glasses a day potentially aid in your heart health? So I would just like to speak to that for a brief moment. And the short answer is like we don't know. It's not really well understood. Um, it's certainly not well understood among anything other than red wine. There are good scientific guesses as to why red wine could be beneficial in your heart health. As far as other alcoholic beverages, it's not nearly as clear. But if I may speak to my number one, my favorite, my love, red wine. Um, Most people, I think, know that red wine contains antioxidants, which come from the grape skins that are used in the fermenting of grapes to make alcohol or to make red wine. Um, and in particular, there's an antioxidant known as like it's like resveratrol. I'm probably mispronouncing that, so sorry in advance.
We'll allow it.
That Thank you, I appreciate it. That antioxidant in particular, which is found in those grape skins, has been shown to increase HDL or good cholesterol and also prevent the buildup of cholesterol like in our blood vessels. So, helping prevent blood clots and things like that. So that could be the key to why a light to moderate consumption of red wine is beneficial for heart health. But the evidence is still we need a lot more of it for that to be conclusive.
Let's go down a rabbit hole here. I'm going to start a conspiracy theory.
Great. Hang on. Hang on.
What if it's not the red wine that gives you the benefit? It's just eating fucking grapes, and grapes just don't get any of the fucking credit.
That could be true. However, I actually thought about that when I was reading this stuff. That could be true. However, I do think part of the reason that it is most effective in the form of red wine is because those grape skins are fermented.
Mm.
I, I think that has to do with why it's effective. Also, that would also explain why white wine does not have as high of a concentration of those antioxidants as red wine, because white wine is still grapes. It's just grapes with skins, like for the it's white grapes and white grapes with skins removed.
Really? That's what the difference is?
Yeah. So white wine is made with white grapes, and usually the skins are removed. If the skins are not removed, you get something called orange wine, which isn't very common here in America, but it does exist and is really delicious. Highly recommended if you can find an orange wine out there. And all red wine, to my knowledge, for the most part, a sommelier can step on here and correct me, is fermented with the grape skins on. And most of the nutrients in grapes are found in the skins, including the antioxidants.
Interesting. Interesting. Maybe the world, much like the moon landing, is not ready for the truth about grapes. But wine sounds a lot better.
Right?
It's like, hey
So
now.
we're putting grapes in the same camp as the moon landing and Taylor Swift at NFL games. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm on board with it.
We went from grapes to space, pop star election.
I mean, it seems like a totally natural trajectory.
Literally, like as you were explaining it, that was my thought. I was like, huh, you're saying the word grape a lot, huh?
Hmm.
Like maybe there's something to these grapes.
Maybe so. I do think it has to do with the fermentation process as well.
Yeah.
I am saying that as not a winemaker or a sommelier, though. So please feel free to come at me and correct me.
Yeah. Please do. Correct her. What's Taylor Swift's favorite wine?
She's a white wine drinker. She loves Chardonnay.
Really?
Hmm I think Sauvignon Blanc, if I'm not mistaken. But she is almost always seen drinking a mixed drink or a white wine. She sings about whiskey a lot.
Yeah.
But allegedly, her favorite cocktail right now is called a French blonde. It's allegedly what she's been ordering when she's been out and about in New York and Kansas City.
I love that people know this information.
Well, the internet can tell you a lot of things.
Yeah, like I understand fandom. But like how do you get to this point? Really? Yeah, I know he likes his coffee. Like, oh, you must have been hung. You know what I mean? It's a very interesting world.
Yeah, that's true.
How do you
I'm
feel
glad,
about Taylor?
glad it's out there.
Yeah, how do you feel about Taylor's whole jet situation
In reference to like her jet emissions,
in general? That's not that that's not part of it, but that's not necessarily what I was asking you. Like I'm talking about with the tracking of it.
people have been tracking celebrities' jet usage for a long time, including hers. There was an article that came out about a year ago that it tracked many, many celebrities' jet emissions, and she ranked number one. Okay, and it was a whole thing, and blah 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 blah. And then most recently, I think probably the reason you're asking the question is because Taylor's camp has threatened to sue this one social media user who has been tracking her jet usage and emissions over the course of her tour. I assume that's why you're asking, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. So in regard to like her actual emissions, I agree. She could probably do better. She probably can't be Greta Thunberg, right? This woman cannot fly commercially. That's not, it wouldn't be safe for literally anyone. And she also can't get where she's going on, self-powered rowboats, if she's going to do this international tour thing. So could she do better? Absolutely. Could a lot of celebrities do better? Absolutely. So I think there's just like a banter there to be had and just a lot of work to be done. Okay, that's what I'll say about that. As far as the tracking goes, I really don't know where I stand on that in terms of like I assume that if Taylor's camp said we're going to threaten to sue this person, sorry, that they looked into it and they have legal grounds to sue. I don't know those legal grounds because I am not a lawyer and not an expert on jet tracking. But I don't think that they would put that out there without any grounds on which to sue. Does that make sense?
I think I think the jet situation is very interesting. On the one hand, yeah, emissions, whatever. That part doesn't really bug me too much. Um, I look at it as like a deeper level. Like at any point, literally, like where Taylor Swift's jet is. So like if someone decided to be like super radical, had a drone, like they're like, oh, where's she at? And just fly to her plane and like shoot her out of the sky. Like that's where my head goes with it. So I get it. Like I get why like some college kid at the University of Florida is like, oh, I'm going to track her jet because she's burning all this emissions. But also, like, if Taylor had to drive everywhere, she wouldn't be Taylor Swift. Like, not saying like she's Taylor Swift, like she has a jet. Like if she had to drive everywhere, she wouldn't be able to do some of the things that she's been doing.
Yeah.
Um,
Sure, sure, sure. Yeah.
even at the Super Bowl, she wouldn't have been able to make that because she would have had to go boat and then car and stuff like that. Wouldn't have been able to deliver one of the most iconic lines regarding airline travel of all time to Travis Kelsey, where I watched that moment with an incredible amount of disgust because I'm a Denver Broncos fan, and the Chiefs are our rival. So like the Chiefs have been fisting us for ever since Mahomes came in the league. So I'm not really like I'm not all about the Chiefs. Like yeah, whatever, they're great, but you know, but they're talking, and she's like, "I'm so proud of you," and he's like, "Oh my god, I can't believe this happened." And he's like, "How are you not tired? Like, how are you not jet lagged?" And she's like, "Oh, jet lag is a choice." Like just straight up, like just an iconic bar from Taylor Swift. Like she needs to work that into a song, but yeah, that's where my head goes with the jet tracking thing. So I get why she would like. I think it's a weird choice by social media outlets to allow it in the first place,
Mm.
because like if Joe Biden was flying from DC to Nebraska, where somewhere, you can't. just publicly see like, oh, where's the president's plane right now? And plus, if you went into his airspace, you'd die. But it's that weird situation where it's like you're doxing someone's like private information, which especially when you're that popular becomes like, stalkers and all that stuff. So I kind of get that. But my head goes to the extreme, obviously, where it's like, oh, someone with a drone is going to shoot her down. And like, you know, it opens up that world of like, you don't want to believe it's a thing. Yet if you look overseas, there were certain concerts that happened to get attacked and stuff like that. So it definitely opens a door to a kind of a messy situation there. So I was just curious.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting. I guess the bigger conversation is, to on the one hand, she has opened herself up to this like continuous breach in privacy that we as like humans and especially Americans like come to know and expect. But as a celebrity at the caliber that she is, like I guess you must forego a level of that. So the question becomes: is the tracking of her jet a breaching of whatever that level of privacy, like assumed privacy, should be? You know what I mean? Like it's a really
Yeah.
it's murky waters. But for a typical American, it sure seems like a breach in basic privacy. But she can't be treated like a typical American, and so I think that's the back and forth of it too.
Yeah. Could you imagine if she did have the flight commercial? It's like the disaster that would happen at airports everywhere, like people just buying flights for no reason. Like it'd be a nightmare.
It would like an absolute nightmare. Yeah, everyone would lose.
The TSA lines are like like concert lines.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, the doors are blowing off, and they're like, "Taylor, sing before we die," and it's like, "Oh,
What song would she sing on the way down?
ooh,
Mm,
Endgame."
in game. Mm.
What else would it be?
I mean, there's "You're Losing Me" if we really wanted to get viscerally
Mm,
sad,
mm, yeah,
or "This
yeah.
Is Why We Can't Have Nice Things." I don't know.
We are never getting back together.
We are never. That's a fact because we're all going to be dead. Uh,
You pick up the phone, you call Jake, like, "Hey, just a heads up, we're going down, and it's not going to be pretty.
but we're still never getting back together.
We're never getting back together. Keep the scarf, bro."
I think that was about Harry, but that's fine.
Oh, yeah. My Taylor lore is
It's okay. It's
definitely
okay. I
corrected.
appreciate you trying. I appreciate you trying.
Yeah. I can sing along with confidence, but
Hmm.
I'm not the deep dive guy.
I'll help you with the inside baseball of it all.
Love it. So this has been great. Obviously, we talked a lot about alcohol. We made allusions to sadness and darkness and loneliness and alcohol and problem drinking. If you or a loved one are concerned that maybe it's affecting your daily life a little too much, don't take our word as the gospel. Definitely consult a professional in that matter. Seek help should you need it, and reach out to your friends. Check in on them, especially in January, February. It's cold. It's miserable. People still are not outside. So seasonal depression, while we look at it as like a November, December thing, definitely wraps into January, February in most climates. So definitely don't want to downplay the importance of that because that is a real issue that people deal with. But
Can
other than
I
that, oh, go for it. Yeah.
can sorry, if I could just list off like the official signs of like alcohol dependence or abuse, it might help you. Like if it's something that you're battling with or you're not really sure or not sure about a loved one, it might help you like discern better if like a conversation needs to be had about those things. The official signs or symptoms of dependence or abuse would be somebody with at least three of the following: drinking despite harm, an intense desire to drink, loss of control over drinking, withdrawal symptoms when you don't drink, salience, which is like choosing to drink alcohol over other things, especially over other things that might be more important, and alcohol tolerance. So if you just have one or even two of those things, or that probably you probably don't have anything to worry about. But if three or more of those ring true for you or a loved one, it would definitely, I think, be something to consider reaching out to someone you love about.
Absolutely. And if you need a drinking buddy, just reach out to
Call
All
us.
Fun
Yeah,
or
love
call
that
us.
too.
Hopefully when you call us, you're a scientist who is also interested in finding out like what happens to the blood chemistry between a vegan and a carnivore person. But
'Cause we would love to talk to you.
yeah, we would love. We got funding. It's not much, but we got some funding. We'll figure it out.
For sure.
All right. So this has been fun. Thank you for joining me. Hopefully you took something away from the episode, and something tells me this is not going to be the last time you appear on the Talk Carb Jimmy podcast.
It's an honor anytime I'm here. So thanks for having me again.